You're listening to Beyond Bizarre True Crime, brought to you by AbJack Entertainment. Be sure to check out some of the other great true crime podcasts from this network, including The Murder in My Family, Missing Persons, DNA ID, Zodiac Speaking, Scene of the Crime, and 3 Men and a Mystery. All of these podcasts are available for you to binge on right now, wherever you listen to podcasts. Subscribe where you're listening to this podcast so you don't miss an episode.
Hello and welcome to another episode of Beyond Bizarre True Crime. My name is Anna Thomas and I'll be your host today. My show is called Apple for the Teacher, which sounds like it's educational, but actually it tells true crime stories associated with schools, and I'm a teacher myself from Australia, if you haven't figured out where my accent is from. For today's episode, I'll be presenting the case of a schoolgirl named Emanuela Orlandi, and as you'll see, it's a case that is beyond bizarre. It was in the year 1981, some 40 years ago, that a new story broke which sent shockwaves across the world. Pope John Paul II was greeting crowds of worshippers in St. Peter's Square in the Vatican. His distinctive white Pope-mobile slowly made its way through the crowds as the Pope waved and shook the hands of his many subjects. But not long after, news bulletins worldwide reported that an attempt had been made on the Pope's life.
The Pope, the former Cardinal Karol Wojtyła of Poland, shot today in serious condition. They said he was shot in the chest. There were 2 shots fired at the Pope at roughly 11:21 a.m. today, Eastern Daylight Time. The Pope had been entering St. Peter's Square for a general audience when an unknown assailant, or more than one assailant fired at him. It's reported that 1 man has been arrested. Vatican Radio said the Pope fell into the arms of his secretary, and the Jeep in which the Pope was riding drove away at high speed. Witnesses said blood was flowing near the Pope's neck. Vatican Radio said 4 or 5 shots were fired at the Pope. Now we've just had the report that there were 2, and, quote, we saw him fall from the shots.
Despite receiving 2 bullet wounds, the Pope survived and fully recovered. The assailant was a member of a Turkish far-right organisation called the Grey Wolves, who were ultra-nationalistic, Islamistic and neo-fascists. The man was given a life sentence, but the Pope visited him in prison, forgiving him for his actions. We will come back to this man as he is connected to today's story. It would then be 2 years after the attempt on the Pope's life that a family in Rome would become inextricably linked to the pontiff's attempted assassination. It was the year 1983, and a family of 7 lived in the Vatican City. At the time, there were roughly 400 people living in the Vatican. Ercole and Maria Orlandi had 5 children, 4 daughters and 1 son. Ercole worked at the Vatican, supervising private audiences for the Pope. The Vatican is an independent state which was granted its independence from Italy in 1929. The Holy See is the name given to the government of the Roman Catholic Church, which is led by the Pope. As such, the Holy See's authority extends over Catholics throughout the world. The current population of the Vatican is around 800, and the only people given authority to live there are the clergy and Swiss guards who defend the Vatican. However, there are others who work within the Vatican who commute in and out each day. So in the Orlandi family, there was a daughter named Emanuela, who was 15 years old. She had considerable musical talent and played flute and piano. Emanuela took flute lessons 3 times a week and travelled to her music school by bus. But it was on a day in June 1983 that she was late for her lesson and asked her brother, Pietro, if he could drive her to the music lesson. But he couldn't, as he had to drive his girlfriend to her university. Emanuela was angry with him and then headed off by herself. After getting off the bus, she had a short distance to walk to the music school. On the way, she was approached by a man offering her a job selling Avon cosmetics, and she told him that she would first have to ask her parents. She went on to have her music lesson and then phoned home, speaking to her sister Federica, as her parents weren't home. Here is what she said to Federica. "While I was going to school, I was stopped by a gentleman who offered me a job distributing Avon products with other girls during the fashion show to be held on Saturday. I will take almost 4,000 lira. He's a nice gentleman, don't worry. He said to ask Mum's permission and give him an answer this evening. He waits for me when I leave school." Her sister Federica told her not to accept the job before speaking to their parents. Emanuela had told her friends at the music school how keen she was to have the job, and then after her lesson, she went to meet with the man as they had arranged. She had also previously arranged to meet her sister in town after her lesson, but when she didn't arrive, her sister went to the music school to see if she was still there, but was told she had left after her lesson. So she went home and told her parents what had happened and about the job offer, but her parents began to worry when she was hours late and hadn't arrived home. They rang many of her friends, but no one knew where she was. Her father and brother then drove around the town looking for her, but had no luck. Late that night, they went to the police, who suggested that maybe she had gone out to dinner with friends, and so she wasn't officially declared a missing person. But when she failed to return home the following morning, they went to the police again, and the media was alerted to her disappearance. And as it turned out, she was actually the second girl who had disappeared within a month. Another girl named Mirella Gregori was also a high school student, and she had gone missing in Rome, and so it wasn't a surprise that people believed there was a link between these 2 schoolgirls going missing within such a short time of each other. The first clue about what happened to Emanuela came from a traffic policeman who believed that he had seen her. He said, "I knew her by sight because I saw her pass by every day. That Wednesday, I saw her near a green BMW parked in a no parking zone in front of the Senate. With her was a man who must have been in his mid-30s. I approached because the car was in a no parking zone. The man assured me that he would leave immediately, as he then did." The policeman also said that the man had been carrying an Avon bag, so the police decided to question the Avon company and were told that they only employed female staff. So after 3 days, there was still no sign of Emanuela, but the family received some hope when a 16-year-old boy phoned them and said that he may have seen Emanuela. He said he had been with his girlfriend and they met 2 girls, and one of them was selling cosmetics. He also said that she had a flute and that she called herself Barbarella. She told them she had run away from home, but no one in the family believed that Emanuela would have run away. Then a few days later, another man who owned a bar near the music school provided them with more information, which was eerily similar to the previous report. He said a girl calling herself Barbara came into the bar and said that she had run away from home, but that she would return for her sister's wedding. And interestingly, Emanuela's older sister was indeed soon to be married. A week then passed with still no sign of Emanuela, and it was then that Pope John Paul II himself made a public appeal about her disappearance. And here is that audio.
Desidero esprimere la viva partecipazione con cui sono vicino alla famiglia Orlandi, la quale è nell'afflizione per la figlia Emanuela di 15 anni, che da mercoledì 22 giugno non ha fatto ritorno a casa. Condivido le ansie e l'angosciosa trepidazione dei genitori, non perdendo la speranza nel senso di umanità di chi abbia responsabilità di questo caso.
And here is the translation of what he said. I would like to express the lively participation with which I am close to the Orlandi family, who are in distress for their 15-year-old daughter, Emanuela, who has not returned home since Wednesday, the 22nd of June. I share the anxieties and anguished trepidation of the parents, not losing hope in the sense of humanity of those who are responsible for this case. I raise my prayer to the Lord so that Emanuela may soon return unharmed to embrace her loved ones who await her with unspeakable torment. For this purpose, I also invite you to pray. This action by a pope had been unprecedented. However, as the family had a close connection to the Vatican, it wasn't altogether unusual. Emanuela's father had worked in the Vatican for a number of decades. There are many photos found online that show the members of the family with the Pope. Emanuela's brother Pietro remembered how they felt so safe within the confines of the Vatican. He viewed it later as such a privilege and a blessing that he and his siblings had grown up within the Vatican. So, after then being missing for 13 days, Emanuela's parents received a call from a man saying that she was being held prisoner by a terrorist group who were demanding the release of the Turkish man who had shot the Pope a few years earlier. They then received another call from a man who played a recording of what was allegedly Emanuela's voice. A demand was made to exchange Emanuela for the Turkish man, and here is an audio of what was said to have been Emanuela. And here is what she said. School Victorio Emanuele II, National Boarding School. I should be doing my third high school this year, scientific. Although this was the school she attended, her family didn't believe the recording was Emanuela. A few days later, a man contacted a news service, and again a demand was made for Emanuela to be exchanged for the Turkish man. He demanded that the Pope use his power to have the man released within 20 days. He stated that he had proof that they had Emanuela and instructed them to look for a package in a public square which he alleged contained some of Emanuela's belongings. And just as the man had said, they found a photocopy of her music school ID and also a note written by Emanuela herself saying, "For Ercole and Maria Orlandi, dear Mum and Dad, don't worry about me, I'm fine. With much affection, your Emanuela." The ID was confirmed to be real, but it could not be confirmed that Emanuela had written the note. 3 days before the 20-day deadline, the Pope made another public appeal for help in finding Emanuela. One can only imagine the distress all of this was causing to her family, but it was what happened next which was just so disturbing if it was authentic. The family received more audio claiming to be Emanuela. It sounded as though a woman was being assaulted, and some even speculated that it was a sexual assault. I've heard the audio, and it sounds like the woman is crying out in pain. There were some who believed it was just a hoax and only acting in a porn film. So for Emanuela's sake, her family really hoped that this was the case. After releasing this audio, a demand was also made for a direct telephone line to be installed to the Cardinal for the Secretary of State at the Vatican. This request was granted, and a man then made 16 phone calls to the number from different telephone booths. One of the calls also threatened to kill the Pope again if the Turkish man in prison was not released. The 20-day deadline then lapsed, with the Turkish man remaining in prison, and the family received no notification if Emanuela was alive or dead. The Pope then told the family Emanuela's disappearance involved international terrorism, but there were never any details provided about what the Pope may have known. The family felt that information was being kept from them. The longer that Emanuela remained missing, the more that various theories were put forward about what may have happened to her. One such theory came from a man who was a former member of a criminal gang in Rome. He stated that Emanuela's kidnapping was enacted against the Vatican in order to force them to repay a large amount of money that a criminal syndicate had lent to the Vatican Bank. This theory argued that taking a Vatican official's daughter for ransom was the way to get their money back, and this theory may have had some credibility when the girlfriend of a gang boss went on the record claiming that he had told her he had indeed kidnapped Emanuela. Emanuela's brother Pietro noted this man resembled the police sketch drawn of the man with the BMW who had been seen by the traffic officer. However, that man had subsequently died, but Pietro pushed for his tomb to be exhumed, hoping that DNA evidence may prove to support the theory. However, there was nothing found linking the man to Emanuela. Another theory put forward was that the Vatican and the police kidnapped young girls like Emanuela and Mirella and forced them to participate in sex parties, where foreign diplomats were also involved. Now we fast forward to 20 years after Emanuela's disappearance. During that time, her father and brother had worked tirelessly to find her, and they felt that the Vatican knew more than they were prepared to say. But Emanuela's father was to pass away in 2004 without knowing what happened to his precious daughter. He had served the Vatican his whole life, having lost confidence in the Catholic Church. On his deathbed, he said, "I was betrayed by those I served with loyalty." Then, only a year later, in 2005, Pope John Paul II fell ill and died. Pietro had always hoped that one day the Pope would tell them what he knew about his sister. In the Pope's last will and testament, it stated that he wanted all his personal documents to be disposed of. The family then felt that whatever he knew about Emanuela had died with him. The Pope had handed over the documents to a personal advisor of his, and Pietro found out that he had not destroyed certain documents as they were deemed to be too important. So Pietro wondered, what was it about these particular documents that made them not destroyed with everything else? He then tried for 10 years to have access to these documents but failed. But finally, when he tried one more time, he was finally granted access to the Vatican archives. But after hours of searching, he found nothing. It was then in 2010, 27 years after Emanuela went missing, that the Turkish man who had attempted to assassinate the Pope was released from prison, and in an interview he stated Emanuela was being kept as a prisoner by the Vatican and then went on to live in another European country in a monastery as a nun. It was then in the year 2013, just 8 years ago, that the Vatican elected a new pope named Pope Francis. The newly elected pope gave his first Sunday Mass in March 2013, and among the sea of worshippers were Emanuela's mother Maria and brother Pietro. At the end of the Mass, Pope Francis stood at the church exit, greeting people as they left, including Maria and Pietro. He he took Maria's hand and said, "Emanuela is in heaven." But Pietro then said to the pontiff, "Until there is proof to the contrary, I live in hope that she's still alive, and I hope that you will help me find the truth." And to this the Pope replied, "She's in heaven." His response really bothered Pietro, and he stated, "For 30 years we don't know if she's dead or alive, and suddenly he comes out and says she's dead. How does he know?" Then, not long after this meeting with the Pope, the 31st anniversary of his sister's disappearance approached, and as it fell on a Sunday, Pietro made a formal request to the Pope that he mention Emanuela in his Mass service. Pietro attended the Mass with 200 supporters, but they were disappointed when he didn't mention Emanuela. They then shouted, "Shame." Pietro said, "She's the only Vatican citizen to ever be kidnapped. Indifference would be bad enough, but there's a desire to have Emanuela forgotten at all costs." Then, 4 years later, Pietro wrote a letter to Pope Francis which reads as follows. Pope Francis, I am Pietro Orlandi, and after all these years, I'm still here seeking the truth about the abduction of my sister Emanuela, a Vatican citizen, an innocent 15-year-old who has been denied the chance to choose her own life, denying even today all forms of justice. A story that over the years has been marked with false leads, cover-ups, silences, and above all, lack of cooperation on the part of the Holy See. You said, he who stays silent is an accomplice. It's true. There are people who know in the Vatican, and they have stayed silent for many years, thus becoming accomplices of those who have responsibilities in this matter. In this regard, there are papers marked confidential, and some authorities of the Holy See are quite aware of this. These papers, which include important information about this inhumane story, could allow us to embrace Emanuela or give her a proper burial. After 33 years, I'm wondering why you continue to deny a family the opportunity to give light and peace to its daughter, to its sister. We have the right to know the truth contained in those documents, and if the pontifical secret was placed on the disappearance of Emanuela, please take off the seals that are creating barriers in obtaining truth and justice. Secrets cannot exist in a state that stands at the center of Christianity because they are contrary to the words and teachings of Jesus. Mine is a strong voice without resignation, which will guide me in this life and beyond, to seek truth and justice, so that this cry for help belongs to all the innocent victims and people deprived of liberty. We will not let anyone steal our hope. Pietro Orlandi, March the 28th, 2017. So, as we've seen, Emanuela's family received various leads over the many years since her disappearance, and it was only a few years ago in 2019 that they were given some further hope. They received an anonymous letter which instructed them to search 2 tombs in a Vatican cemetery, which supposedly contained Emanuela's remains. The letter showed a photo of a stone figure which was pointing, and the letter said to search where the figure was pointing. So the tombs were opened, but they turned out to be empty. So, as it stands today, Emanuela has never been found, and here are some final words from Pietro. He firstly talks about the countless theories that have been put forward over the years. I don't know about the theories, but I do say this. The behaviour of the Vatican over these 36 years has been one of secrecy and lack of collaboration, and it has made me think there are leaders within the Vatican who know what happened. But due to this being so damaging to the image of the Church, they've been doing all they can to ensure that the truth doesn't come out. And here he talks about that fateful day when Emanuela asked him to take her to her music lesson. It's a very painful memory. She insisted I take her, and we rowed over it. Then she left, slamming the door. I never thought it would be the last time I saw her. I've gone over it so many times, telling myself if only I had accompanied her, maybe it wouldn't have happened. From that day, my family entered into this nightmare. My mother is 88 and she has every faith in all that I'm doing. She prays for me as she believes I will find out what happened to Emanuela, whether she is alive or dead. Until we find her remains, we must never stop hoping she's still alive. There have been countless books written about her disappearance, including one by a female photographer who followed the family for months and then devised a plan to get some of Emanuela's mother's hair as she wanted to test the DNA. So the plan involved putting tape around her fingers and then running them through Maria's hair. And it worked, as she managed to get strands of her hair. So in the next part of the plan, she went through Pietro's garbage and took one of his wife's discarded tampons. So why on earth would she do this? Because she needed DNA from Maria and Pietro's wife, because she had a wild theory that his wife was actually Emanuela, pretending to be his wife. Can you believe this? When Pietro was asked about this, he said, "Nothing surprises me anymore." But for me, her brother is an absolute saint. What he has done to find his sister is just so heartwarming, but also heartbreaking. I just so feel for him. This has consumed his life for almost 40 years. You can see photos of him and his sister together, and it's just so sad to look at. You see them as they were as little children. He has given countless interviews on TV shows and remained in the public eye in all of these years that have passed. So really, he hasn't been able to have a normal life. I would imagine his sister has been in his thoughts every day. So his sister's disappearance has defined his life. He has a Facebook page and Instagram dedicated to Emanuela, so you can see that he still campaigns to this very day. And while researching this story, I came across a haunting video of Emanuela herself just a month before her disappearance. She and her classmates from her high school had all participated as an audience in a television program. So you can actually see videotape of her in the audience, and it just defies belief that in only a matter of weeks, she was to disappear so mysteriously. So that's the end of the bizarre case of the disappearance of Emanuela Orlandi. Thank you for joining me for this episode of Beyond Bizarre True Crime, and be sure to check out the next episode, which will be hosted by Barry from the Open Shutters podcast. If you'd like to listen to more of my podcast, Apple for the Teacher, it's available wherever you get your podcasts and can also be found on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. But let me leave you now with this preview of my show. Hi, I'm Anna Thomas, and let me tell you about my podcast, Apple for the Teacher. It sure sounds like it's about reading, writing, and arithmetic, but don't let the title fool you. I'm a teacher from Australia and tell true crime stories associated with schools, which go far beyond shootings and teacher sexual misconduct. If you're like me, you may feel that you know enough about some high-profile cases, such as Ted Bundy and the Zodiac Killer. Apple for the Teacher presents lesser-known stories, such as albino student murder in Africa, schoolgirl sexual slavery in Libya, a school suicide bombing in Pakistan, a student murdered and buried in his school in India, a teacher beheaded in France, Polish teachers executed by the Nazis, just to name a few. But you'll also find school-based tragedies, such as a school bus stranded in a snowstorm, a school wiped out by a landslide, the drowning of students in a sinking ship. It can be described as a mixed bag of diverse stories. So if you're looking for something a little different in the true crime genre, then give it a listen. And I hope you can join me soon. But until then, remember to be a good apple.
Beyond Bizarre True Crime is produced by Mike Morford and Jess Betancourt for AbJack Entertainment, with music by Connor Betancourt. If you enjoy this podcast, make sure to subscribe wherever you are listening now, and please take a moment to rate and review the show. You can find Beyond Bizarre True Crime on social media. We're on Twitter and Instagram with the handle @BeyondBizarreTC. You can also find us on Facebook by searching for Beyond Bizarre True Crime Podcast. The views and opinions of the hosts and guests on Beyond Bizarre True Crime do not necessarily represent those of the show's creators, producers, or sponsors. Be sure to tune in on Saturdays for all new episodes of Beyond Bizarre True Crime.